Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We might have more folks join us, but we're going to get started right on time. We're here until 12:25, roughly. And then we'll hop off to the next session, but we're super excited to be in this session here. We have our presenter, Susanna Thomas. She's a Dubai-based educator and entrepreneur. She's the one waving. She's an academic and pastoral leader specializing in curriculum design and use of assessments in the classroom. And she is also the co-founder of the Master Educator Group, Dubai's first Black-owned educational constancy firm. Shout out to you, Susanna. And we also have Camille McPherson as our other presenter. She's a Canadian early childhood educator and leader based in Dubai. And she has taught abroad for over the last 10 years and strives to foster an understanding of the connections and interplay between technology, pedagogy, and curriculum. All important. Camille also creates and sells digital resources, tutors, and offers coaching through her Instagram page called Teaching from Square One. All that information is in the conference booklet. So if you want to go back and check those details, you'll have access. And also their social media handles are in the conference booklet as well. Before we proceed with their session, I also just want to mention our vendors. There are a lot of really cool education related items that you can purchase. It ranges from, as low as $10 to $15 to as much as about $50, depending on what kind of items you want. So I'll just put the link for that in the chat. And then I'm going to stop talking so that our lovely presenters can lead us in this session.
Okay. All right. Well, hi, everyone. It's so good to be with you all. And we hope that you're enjoying the Melanin Magic Conference and that you find this workshop useful.
Absolutely. So we're going to be using Nearpod to present our presentation here, our session. So if you want, you can join here at join.nearpod.com using this code. The code will also be here on the left-hand side of your screen. But if you also just want to tune in and use the chat, that's also okay. I will do my best to navigate in between. But yeah, let's get started.
All right. Okay, well, welcome everyone to our workshop. We've called it Beyond Quotas, Measuring Inclusivity and Diversity as a Holistic Practice in School. So moving the social curriculum out of the realm of buzzwords and catchphrases and into the realm of intentional and an important facet of your school's ethos and your school's actions when it comes on to developing your students.
So, okay, so you heard a little bit about Susanna and I. We are based in Dubai. Susanna's lived in Dubai over 10 years. I have been there for the last 9 years. I was in Korea before that. So we have been teaching internationally for quite some time, but we have also been teaching internationally at American curriculum schools. So we've formed the Master Educator Group in 2020 along with Davida. She's traveling back from the States to Dubai today, which is why she's not able to attend. She sends her regards. And if you use the QR code at the bottom corner here, you'll see it on pages periodically. That will connect you to our link tree where you can connect with us through LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. We love to connect with educators around the world if you're looking for mentorship, recruitment, teaching abroad. That's definitely something that we could help you out with as well. Anything else, Susanna, before we start?
And I mean, just community, if you just want to engage it with dialogue with international educators about, what we're doing, what you're doing, what we can share, what you can share. I mean, it's not just for mentorship, it's also just for community and dialogue.
All right. So we're going to quickly start with an activity. We want to know, what does inclusivity mean to you? What does it look like in your school? What does successful inclusivity look like in your school? So I'm just going to enable this collaboration board. If you're on, you can throw them in here, but you can also throw that in your chat. We'll take a quick minute or two to see some responses and discuss them. Okay, here we go. So we've got one, truth and honesty.
Okay.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I think you've got like 6.
I don't have
bullets,
any. Oh, in the chat, maybe?
maybe.
Mm-mm. Ah, here's another one. Oh, here we go. Here they all come.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so making sure that everyone involved feels like they're involved. Authenticity, all are valued. People from all identities knowing that they belong, I guess that is. Being willing to analyze your bias and education, so important. Inclusivity means that all individuals feel safe and welcome to learn, grow, and thrive in their learning space. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so our objectives for this session are hopefully by the end of this session, we will be able to identify some strategies that promote inclusivity and cultural competency in a school environment. Some strategies you might already be using individually or your school might be using collectively. Others might be a bit new and interesting. And of course, I just want to clarify that by cultural competency, it really encompasses what we've just discussed in the slide, where we recognize that there are nuances, there are differences in everyone in a community and in everyone's experience. And all experiences and histories and cultures are valued and important and recognized as valid. Okay, so that is basically what cultural competency means. And then after we've identified those strategies, we're going to move into the sphere of measuring impact. So great, we've got initiatives, we've got, classroom activities, we have staff activities, but are we actually having an impact on student growth? Are we having an impact on creating a positive cultural climate within the school as modeled by the leaders, by the teachers, by the operations and management? Like, are we actually having an impact, or are we just flouncing and doing random activities that are not actually as meaningful or as impactful as we want them to be? Okay, so, or why? As an educator of color in an international school setting, I very rarely have the opportunity to have these kinds of dialogues. I would say that there are more opportunities that are being created now as a result of global issues, of BLM, of what happened in 2020 and the dialogues that the world is having. But they exist in very limited spaces, usually among other educators of color, and not necessarily on the platform that they need to exist on in order to make sure that we're all very respectful of each other's culture and each other's experiences. So, most of the times when I have these dialogues, it's just buzzwords like, okay, we're going to attack this in our school community now, so let's have a day where we can discuss this. And it's simply not meaningful, it's not impactful, and it's not deliberate, and it's not intentional. It is really compliance-based. So it's not authentic, which, as we've said before, authenticity is probably the most important facet of targeting inclusivity and diversity. Okay, so our programs and initiatives measure the same way as we measure student progress and attainment. We're serious about student progress and attainment. We're serious about the academic side, but what about the social curriculum? What kind of learners are we sending out into the world? Are we sending out learners who are more empathetic, more culturally aware, aware of global issues? Are we actually building and sending those kind of learners out into the world? So that really is, or why.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to do a quick poll. How successful, let me see if I can do it from the student side. How successful do you feel your school is at taking on these initiatives of inclusivity and diversity in your school? If you're not logged on to Nearpod, you can throw it in the chat, A, B, or C. It's coming up, I think. Hold on. Uh-oh, let me go back and enable it. Yeah, I think I have to click it and then, here we go, there we go. All right, so let me. All right. So you'll be able to see it on my screen if you want to throw it in the chat. Here you can throw in A, B, or C. So how successful is your school in its implementation of initiatives to drive cultural competency among students and staff? How successful is the school in measuring the impact of these initiatives and revising policy as required?
So I hope that, you know, in your school climate that you're having better luck than we are having currently, and that, you know, maybe there's some A's or B's in there. For us so far, we're
Mine's
at
a
the beginning
C.
of that journey.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a C. It's definitely
Yes.
a C. But we hope that maybe, you know, in your school environments, you are having more luck than we are. So if you could just write, you know, are they doing very well? Are they doing okay, B, or are they not doing well at all in driving those initiatives? Okay, so most are doing okay.
Right, which is pretty good. I didn't vote because if we voted, it definitely would have weighed a little differently, but it's good to see that most are doing okay. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is, why are we not more intentional? Why do we not measure the impact of the initiatives that we're doing? You know, if we are, you know, doing really intentional projects that promote diversity, if our class decor is really intentional around promoting representation, then why are we not measuring that to see what the difference is in the student experience? Why are we not intentional and deliberate? So here, we're just gonna offer you one way that you can be a bit more intentional and a bit more deliberate in measuring the impact of what you are doing and what your school is doing. Okay, because we all need to really evaluate our bias, look at what initiatives we're putting forward and the impact of those on our learning community. So why rubrics? Of course, sets out clear expectations. What does expert look like if we're doing it really well, if we're struggling a bit but getting there, and if we're not there at all in the realm? So they act as a standardized form of measure. We can use them to reflect on an activity or an entire unit or an entire initiative. And of course, they can be used at many different levels, from within the classroom with students, teachers to evaluate themselves, leaders to evaluate themselves, and of course, operations and HR, because it's really important that this be an entire school initiative that's modeled and exemplified through all members of the school community, not just within the classroom with students. It has to be throughout the entire school community.
Okay, so again, if you see our QR code here and scan it, you'll get a copy. You can get a PDF copy of some of the rubrics that Susanna and I have sat down and compiled together. There's quite a few. We are going to be zeroing in on cultural awareness today at a few different levels, but there's a whole bunch of different examples that you can use in your school and modify them, collaborate with your own administration to align them to your school's ethos and your school's philosophy, and you can access them through this QR code here. Okay.
So the rubrics are going to give us a bit more information on what best practice looks like, or what mastery looks like when it comes on to cultural awareness. So for example, if your student is displaying expert tendencies, then they should be adjusting their own attitudes and beliefs as a result of working within and learning from diverse cultures, communities. They also should encourage and promote others' engagement with diversity. That's really the student kind of examining the world around him at a level of mastery. However, a student who is a novice or a beginner might express attitudes and beliefs as an individual and from a one-sided point of view. They are usually indifferent or resistant to what can be learned from diversity of communities and cultures. So for example, in the classroom, when we introduce, diverse resources with diverse characters, there is an inability for students to connect or to make those connections. And there's also an indifference to making those kinds of genuine connections with the material that we're looking at. So students are able to kind of evaluate where they are at different stages throughout the year based on more and more exposure to different activities, to different resources, to different images, and to different initiatives. And you will be able to see, where is your school population in your core value? Where are they? Or do you have more novices, more learners, more practitioners, or are you all experts? If, of course, we're in novice or learner, it means that we need to be doing more. We need to be pushing this initiative a bit more and measuring, looking at policy in order to make sure that we are on the right side of the scale. So I'm not going to go through, we have provided a sample for elementary just because the language needs to be a bit different so that students can access it for self-reflection. But I'm not going to go through that for the sake of time. But it is, however, in the pack so that you can go through and read them in your own time.
Right.
Okay. Now, of course, students aren't the only ones who really need to evaluate themselves and their cultural awareness and what they're doing to promote that. Of course, as teachers, we also need to set out some expectations for ourselves. So for example, as an expert in cultural sensitivity and cultural awareness, I would model inclusive language and behavior consistently without any gaps visible. I would intentionally and carefully diversify my classroom resources, my classroom decor, and my learning materials. I would also plan assignments carefully, ensuring that they represent all perspectives, embrace cultural differences, show diversity in images and experiences, and that the content of the lesson is always respectful, truthful, and relevant to the student population. As a novice, I might not model inclusive language or behavior. I might not try to learn my students' names. I might not pronounce them correctly. I might be insensitive to issues that are specific to certain ethnicities, cultures, religions. My classroom decor and resources are not varied or representative. My assignments are not often modified to ensure that they represent all perspectives. I'm happy to stick to the given resource and I don't diversify my portfolio. And the content of my lesson is very rarely culturally relevant. I am just focusing on literature that is completely outside of the realm of understanding and those connections that my students can make, and I'm not bothered. I'm not bothered about it either. So it's important for us to kind of evaluate, because there's no shame in being at the novice end of the scale, but we do have to recognize that that's where we are and take those targeted steps to move a bit further up on the continuum.
Right.
And looking at it from a perspective of leadership, if we have any leaders in the session, it's not just teacher and students who need to exemplify this. As I said, it needs to be a whole school initiative, and leadership also has to exemplify these qualities. So they also have to model inclusive language and behavior consistently, knowing all of their staff names, how to pronounce the experiences of different ethnicities, religious sects within their school, and respect for that. They also have to ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion are embedded in the curriculum and in the learning experiences and relationships among staff through policy. How much money do we invest? Do we invest any money at all in diversity training, in cultural competency training? We invest very nicely in pedagogical approaches. We invest very nicely in classroom approaches to learning, but do we actually invest money in training our staff to make sure that we're all culturally competent? Because if we don't, then we can't really claim that we have an intentional and deliberate focus on cultural competency. Do we have a clear policy in place that outlines zero tolerance for discrimination based on race, gender identity, sexual orientation or identity, and learning differences? Is the policy collaborative and is it updated frequently? Or on the other scale, I don't model inclusive language and behavior. Diversity and inclusion are not prioritized in the school and among staff. I don't celebrate employee differences, and I have not initiated any form of a committee that celebrates or acknowledges different communities or welcomes open dialogue on global issues or events. You know, we really have to be intentional about measuring where we are and what we're doing to get further. Next one. Now, this is an often forgotten sect that seems to operate in isolation from the rest of the school's ethos. Like HR, operations, facilities, they're free to just, you know, do as they please. HR is free to kind of create their own policies that may or may not necessarily be in line with the school's ethos when it comes on to cultural competency. You know, so, but in order for us to really be living this, to make it be an embedded and intentional part of the school community, everyone, all stakeholders have to buy in and have to have that measure that we have to aspire to. So for an expert, we have a diverse staff and student population with teachers from various countries, states, social and economic backgrounds, and we do not ever seek to have a majority staff ethnic group at the school. Our staff and student dress codes acknowledge differences in body type, gender identity, hair type, and cultural dress expectations. So the nuance in the way that we present is respected, encouraged, and validated. Our recruitment policy is unbiased and seeks to recruit candidates from various cities, districts, regions, and recognized educational institutions. We're not biased toward a particular area, particular university, a particular area. We acknowledge and accommodate various cultural, social, and ethnic traditions. So provisions are put in place for Muslim staff who are celebrating Ramadan, etc. On the other hand, we might have novice HR representatives who do not ensure that staff and student populations are diverse. They actively seek to have a majority staff and student ethnic group at the school. Staff and student dress codes are rigid. They don't acknowledge any differences in body type, body shape, gender identity, hair type, cultural dress expectations. The recruitment policy traditionally targets specific regions, areas, and educational institutions. And there is no acknowledgement or accommodation of various cultural, social, and ethnic traditions. So it's just a rigid system with no kind of wiggle room or space for cultural expression or racial expression at all. Okay, so we have to make sure, just to sum up, that all aspects have a clear set of expectations around the core values of the school, and that we are regularly and systematically reflecting on where we are as a school community, individually and collectively.
All right, so we're going to ask that you reflect on your own practice and pedagogy and circle on the teacher rubric where you feel that you are.
So are you a novice? Are you a learner?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a practitioner? Or are you an expert when it comes on to cultural awareness?
Again, if you're not in Nearpod, you can definitely throw novice, learner, practitioner, or expert in the chat. I wonder if I can pull up so you can read it. I know there's a few people maybe that are not. Switch to student view and see. There we go. I'll go back at about 1 minute so that we can see some of the responses. I guess for Susanna and I think, you know, teaching abroad has really forced us to become experts at this. You'll see in the next few slides and some of the examples of what I've experienced teaching abroad, and you might experience yourself in, you know, certain schools. You know, it's really driven us to become experts and carefully plan all of our assignments and look at our curriculum and make the appropriate modifications that are needed to really push our own personal beliefs, but and pedagogy practices, but also staff members around us in our schools to become a little bit more culturally aware of what is happening. Okay, I'll just go back here.
And I think that, you know, unless you are in a school with a majority ethnic group, then there are bound to be gaps in our understanding, like there are bound to be gaps in our ability to really promote cultural competency. It's only because I think we're the only ones. You know, like in our school communities, we are one or two teachers of color from the West. We're
Right.
literally one or two, and we're just surrounded by a majority who is not as culturally competent as we would like. So we have to inject that. Interesting, excellent. So let's go look. So a lot of people feel like they are experts with some qualities around in the practitioner column. Then Merchant Narcisse also suggests that she might be a practitioner, but hopefully moving toward expert. And Sarah also has a mixture of both, as well as Sierra. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, so the next slide, we're going to kind of zoom through. I'm looking at the time here. We know that there are many practical strategies that schools are using to create inclusive and diverse environments. So on the next slide, we're just going to ask you to match the strategy to the example. I'll just give 1 minute, just again, based on time, and then go over some of the strategies that are probably in place right now. Let me switch to student view. If you are not logged on to your pod, don't worry about doing this activity in the chat. It would be too challenging. And then we'll have a quick chat, and then I'll just go through some of the classroom strategies that I use and have some of the experience that I have had. So here are the strategies here. You're just matching them. You'll just click on the strategy to match them with the example. And it's a lot of reading. Okay, I'm just going to flip back and see if anyone is already done. Okay, perfect. Excellent. Pretty much everyone's done, it looks like. So I'm going to move on. So as I said, this is not an exhaustive list of strategies that schools are probably using, but to just quickly go over them. The education of leaders, this is probably more so again for international teachers, but still relevant, that we share stories and we share our experiences and how we're feeling with everything that is happening. It's very easy to walk into a school every day and know that you have a job to do, but you are still carrying the weight of what is happening in the world around you into the school and into your classroom, and you're not able to perform as a teacher as best as you would like to because of everything that's happening. So making sure that you can have that open dialogue, share stories, recommend literature for, you know, people that really want to know more but don't know where to find it and where to go. I've had parents, you know, approach me and ask, you know, how can I start talking to my child about, you know, different cultures, ethnicities, things that are going on in the world. So as, you know, a teacher and someone who wants to be an expert, being able to point them in the right direction. I have not worked in a school that has an inclusion council, but I think that is definitely a fantastic initiative. And I think it's super important because, you know, most schools have people that are passionate about really creating that, cultural awareness and living those ethos and philosophies that schools, present themselves to have. And so, creating a community of teachers and staff members that are willing to encourage ongoing, meaningful strategies that are happening day to day. Celebrating employee differences, just like, we have cultural day for students, making sure that we have that for staff as well. And we embrace, different hairstyles, different textures of hair, religious practices, and finally communicating goals and measuring progress. This is where the rubrics could be really helpful in your school, and having a plan to check and assess the impact. Impact is, such a huge buzzword right now, and being able to measure that in an unbiased way, and have a check-in, I think would be, again, a great initiative and a way to use the rubrics that we have discussed today. So let me look at the time. I'm just going to quickly go through some things. Teaching abroad has really kind of catapulted, a lot of my business efforts, my entrepreneurship in creating cultural awareness activities that are accessible to teachers in the Gulf. And I've had to reflect on all of these things a little bit more informally because I didn't use rubrics, or I haven't used them as much as Susanna has. But being in the UAE in a multicultural society, I know that it's important for me to prepare students as well as alert them to ways in which they might be blind to their own culture. So some of the strategies here, this is a school that I've worked in, and the school was predominantly local or children of the Gulf region. And this is a very common thing to see. This is a bulletin board of, I think we were doing community helpers this particular weekend. The TAs put together the boards. And as you can see, the people and the community helpers on the board do not reflect the students of the UAE. Or the students' body of the actual school. And so it was quite jarring to me, because of course, someone who has really tried to, change the, perception of what they might feel people of the West look like and sound like and act. This is still what we see day to day. So diversifying our resources are super important. I've had, students refuse to draw themselves with a brown crayon and say, Ms. Camille, brown is not nice. And I've had to change, their perception of using brown in the classroom, just making sure that those resources are available to them. And then, of course, as I continued my teaching, it would be harder and harder to find resources that not only reflected different complexions, but also different ethnicities and, religious backgrounds. So I've started to create more digital resources and games. This is a Guess Who game. And as you can see, it's quite different than the original one. If you go back and look at the original Guess Who game, in fact, they are all white. There has been some changes in the Hasbro version, but I have, included different religious backgrounds or cultural backgrounds, where it just doesn't only provoke questioning skills and critical thinking, but also builds on vocabulary, cultural vocabulary, and opens discussion. So this is also something that you can find on Teachers Pay Teachers under Teaching for Square One. Here is a slide that I just want to talk about. I am Canadian, but Caribbean, grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood and went to a predominantly white school. And so while I was very aware of my differences, and it pushed me to respect and want to learn more about, other cultures, moving abroad pushed that even more. And I'm a huge advocate for sharing, student sharing, culture sharing. International pen pals is a fantastic way to do this if your school is maybe not as diverse, but making sure that students have the opportunity to learn about different cultures. We would be happy to connect you with schools if you're interested in having some sort of international pen pal ship with schools abroad so that you can create those opportunities for students to learn about different cultures, from the source. We would be happy to do that. Moving on to knowing your students and watching for problematic assumptions. When I went to Korea, as I said, they were told to change their name to something that maybe would be easier for us to learn or pronounce. And, as I reflect, that wasn't right, I at least give them the option. I am absolutely willing to learn your name. I want to learn your actual name, and giving them that option so that, they feel comfortable in your classroom and that you're pronouncing it properly and you're modeling that inclusive behavior and language. And then of course, examining your curriculum. Again, being abroad in the UAE, that's something that we naturally have to do as we're teaching mostly Muslim students. We're not allowed to have images of pigs or dogs in certain, in the house, or, we're told that we're not allowed to do that. So naturally, we do have to examine our curriculum, but examining it for other things as well, making sure that it does represent them and what they see around them, and that the content is respectful and truthful is extremely important. So utilizing these strategies here will push you into your expert column there. So I think we're right on, yes. If anyone has any questions, you can throw them into the chat. Again, we would love to connect with you. The rubrics are available through our link tree. You can just email us or message us through Instagram. We would be happy to connect you with schools that we might be at, even if you were looking to do an international pen pal program. Info, Susanna. You put an L in the beginning.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. It's okay.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you guys so much for attending with us, and I hope that it was useful for you. And if you have any feedback or would like to continue to engage in dialogue with us to let us know, what's happening at your schools or in your community and what we can learn and take over to our school community, we'd really welcome that dialogue. So connect with us on Instagram, and, thank you so much. Thank you.
Appreciate it.